In this section, we want to talk about graphing equations and inequalities, meaning we're going to come up with a visual representation of all the possible solutions for an equation or an inequality in two variables. Before we do that, though, we want to talk about the rectangular coordinate system and some vocabulary and characteristics related to it. The first thing to talk about is that when we have a rectangular coordinate system, our horizontal axis is generally labeled as the x-axis. The vertical axis is for our y values. Those two axes divide our grid into four separate regions that we call quadrants. Starting in the upper right-hand corner, we refer to that as quadrant 1, and then we move in a counterclockwise direction, labeling these quadrants as 2, 3, and 4. And we usually do that using Roman numerals. Looking at quadrant 1, that's the quadrant where both our values for x and our value for y are positive. And then as we get into those other quadrants, we start seeing negative values for x or y. We also have a point right at the center, which we refer to as the origin, right where our x and our y axis meet. We can identify points on a rectangular coordinate system as ordered pairs, which are expressed in the form x comma y inside a set of rounded parentheses. Keep in mind this is different than interval notation. We're not expressing a range of values, just the particular x and y values that correspond to a specific point. For instance, the origin can be identified as 0, 0. It's the point where both our x and our y values are 0, and then as we move left, right, up, or down, those values start to change to get larger or smaller than 0. In the first quadrant, we see that both our x and our y values are positive, as we already mentioned. So any point that exists in the first quadrant will have a positive x coordinate and a positive y coordinate. In the second quadrant, now x becomes negative, but y stays positive. Because we're moving to the left of the origin, x is getting below 0, but we're moving above the origin, so y is positive. In quadrant 3, both x and y are negative. And in quadrant 4, x is going to be positive and y will be negative. Looking at an example of plotting points, we want to plot -5, 4 and 8, -2 on this rectangular coordinate system and identify the quadrant where it's located. In order to plot a point, we always start at 0, 0 right in the center. We can move in either direction first, but it's generally common to move in the x direction first, so we move left to right. So the first thing that we would do is move to the left to get to -5, and then move up to +4. And right where that path ends, we would put our point, -5, 4, and we can see that we've ended up in the second quadrant. To graph 8, -2, we'll start at the origin again and move to the right until we hit x equals 8, and then move down until we hit y equals 2, to get to our point 8, -2, which is in the fourth quadrant. Taking a look at how we do this in our homework system, if we, in this case, have 4 different points that we want to plot, we'll be given this grid and a single drawing tool to select, which is just a point. we'll find each of those values, for instance at x equals 3 and y equals -8, and click or tap at that point, and it'll drop a point in its place. So similarly, we would do that at -5, 5, 7, 9, and -4, -3.